Good morning, my friends. This is Bryan Betts with Pastor Eric Siepen and Pastor Andy Littleton.
Cheers.
Good morning. How are you both doing?
Doing good. Good to be here.
Yeah, I'm doing well. Hey, this is, we're at XO Coffee. We record this podcast at XO Coffee, and I have a muffin here that is so delicious. I think I just pulled out approximately a 4-inch, maybe 2-inch piece of apricot fruit that looked nearly fresh out of my muffin, and this is unheard of in my circles. So this is a muffin you've got to have. If I were you, I'd come down here now and ask for this muffin.
That's a really good plug.
Yeah, was it? I mean it. Yeah.
Do they pay you for that plug?
No, no.
Well, they're
maybe someday.
They should.
One day. I'm actually getting paid for this plug. They have amazing room temperature water in glass, and for only $12.99, you can pay me to talk about it again next week.
That's great.
So,
and you seem to have gotten a coaster for your water, but you're eating it, which is strange. It's I think this is actually a healthy snack you're eating. It looks,
yes,
looks
it's
like a coaster.
It's an R bar. I think they're actually local to Tucson. They're no sugar added, gluten-free, vegan, non-dairy, non-GMO, with only 3 ingredients. So very close to a coaster.
I was going to say that sounds about as
3
appetizing
ingredients,
as a coaster.
wood bark.
But if they've made it more appetizing, they've really accomplished something.
And it tastes great. And I got double chocolate, so I'm sure it's supposed to be healthy, and I chose the least healthiest option.
Good call.
And I have a hot chocolate. And they're not paying me for that, so I don't want to talk about it. But it was delicious, so I should be honest about that.
Yeah.
What did you have this morning?
I had their iced coffee, their cold brew. It's like drinking chocolate. It's not sweetened. It's just and really smooth.
Okay.
That's
an okay thing.
It's very, very good.
Yeah.
And their maple scone, which is pretty much all I eat here. So.
Yeah, Bryan has a maple idolatry problem.
Maple donuts. This wasn't going to be my confession this morning. Like last week, I talked about my car, and we will get back into that because I know so many people are curious about that.
Our followers are dying.
All 75 of our followers are interested in it.
All 75 of whom 30-some have listened. Thank you all.
34 to be exact.
34. That's great.
I was not one of them. Yeah. I'll be honest. I hear my voice, and I no, thank you. So I need to.
I feel the same way about your voice.
I'm glad. Thank you. Finally, someone's honest. We should talk about that today, about transparency in the church and leadership.
It's a good idea.
I know. But my confession this morning was going to be, I had so many that I could possibly go through. One of them was you had texted that you were going to be late. Mm-hmm. And I would almost texted, haha, # classic Andy.
Also true.
But I was also late this morning. And I was like, I hadn't even gotten my car yet, and I was about to text that. It was like 3 minutes till 7:30.
Yeah.
We tried to be here at 7:30. And Eric Siepen was on time as always.
Early.
He had, again, already eaten the meal before.
Yeah.
But
Well, I'm the old person. I have to be early.
And Eric has this thing where he doesn't like to eat with others. I mean, he has a church where they eat together, and that's the big thing. But then when you show up to eat with him, he's already eaten, which is kind of a violation of community. I'm just going to say, since we're putting that out there.
I would like to say I started eating at 7:30, which is the time that we're all supposed to be here. So.
That's true. Being late is also a violation of community. So community's been violated this morning several times. So your confession was you were going to make a comment, then you realized you were late, and then...
I knew that it was going to be hypocritical. Like, the hypocrisy was realized before a comment was made.
Yeah, that's good.
That
always
that's
helps.
how... I'm glad that I know myself and my sin well enough to just, spot it. I had, a ton of... I had a list of confessions that I was going to go through. But we'll stick with that.
That's a good one.
I got a new car, and it drives very well. I'm very thankful. Got a good deal on it. I got another Honda Accord. Hey. I really wanted Toyota Tacoma. I actually talked to you about this. Yeah. But, so that's my temporary updates. Physically, I'm fine. My new car is a blessing. And, I want to talk to you, though. It's been 2 weeks.
Mm-hmm.
How have you both been?
Yeah. Been great. So my wife and I got out of town. It's been 2 weeks. We were going to record last week, and I thought you two did record last week because I didn't check our podcast page. Typical.
Because you're not one of the 34
Andy
listeners.
Yeah, but oh shoot. But my wife and I went to Flagstaff, Arizona. Beautiful little semi-mountainous town, a little cooler. We got away and we had a nice getaway, except for the big fight we had in the middle. That was a bummer. But honestly, it was good because we went up there, we were excited, and then there was some just like little letdown things, and it kind of all like came out, like some other frustrations. But then I think we really had a beautiful time at the end of the week, like having kind of reconciled and worked through that. And in a way, I'm just really grateful for that break and that getaway where we were able to talk about that and just have hours of time, because it was stuff that had been, because of our busy lives that we just hadn't really worked out the way that we needed to. And so overall, I would consider it a huge success and blessing. Just that trip is fun. And we ate out too much, and we ate a lot, and I feel like massive. I feel like a massive person. I'm not massive, but I feel massive. Just ate so much food, walked around, and that was about our whole week. Walk around, eat. Walk around, eat. Fight. Walk around, eat. Hug, kiss. Walk around, eat. Yeah.
And this was for your anniversary?
Celebrating our anniversary just a little bit after. And the other thing we did, which we always do, is we went to thrift stores a lot. That's like our thing. That's what we do. My daughter's in the background. She's laughed because she's like, yes, that's what my dad does all the time. So that's what I've been up to. How about you guys?
Well, what do you mean? You want to know over the last 2 weeks what I've been up to?
Whatever you want.
Whatever I want. Well, I'm getting ready to go on vacation. So I was mostly just sitting around envying you, looking at your Instagram pictures and thinking, what does he do? He's a pastor. He only works Sundays anyway. Does he really need a vacation?
Right. That's a good point.
I mean,
that's all
he did.
Yeah,
Sundays for 2 hours.
And I just talk, not about things I've prepared for. I just talk off the top of my head. Mm-hmm. Just, all my thoughts. And then I go home, and the rest of the week, I just kind of sit around and read my Bible.
It's pretty good. So, that's all joking aside. We are going on vacation, and I'm ready to do that because last night I had some major stress dreams. I'm having stress dreams.
Yeah.
I think I'm just kind of ready to be done, which after doing this for 17 years, it usually May hits, and I'm like, I don't know if I can do this anymore. Mm-hmm. And so usually I take a month off this year. We're only taking 2.5 weeks off, but for this period of time anyway. But, I just think being a pastor, you get really tired, and there's a lot of people and things that are kind of pressing on you.
Yeah.
And there's a lot to worry about, a lot to think about, and every relationship has a set of dynamics that you are kind of dealing with. And in our community in particular, that's built around community, people are in each other's lives a lot.
Yeah.
And so there's, it's a potential, sometimes it feels like a potential minefield all the time. But
so what part of that, this is, I'm just interested in this really quick, a little sidetrack, but what part of that weighs the heaviest on you personally? Like I'm sure, every pastor's engaged in the lives of people, but I hear different things from different ones. Like this part of it, just with me and my personality, just weighs heavily on me. Like, what is that for you?
That's a good question, and I'll just edit that pause out there.
Yeah. The pause when my daughter was trying to not have to eat her croissant. I said, please finish that.
We should say that we have a fourth guest today. We have Abby, who's part of our little loft conversation. So
she's a pastor.
You might as well come over here and say hello.
Say hi, Abby. Come say hi.
Hi.
It's good to see you. To answer your question, I think in some ways I end up in 3 parts of, one, it's the nature of our community places me in lots of stories that are hard to listen to, and just to hear the pain and struggle or the present feeling of depression or defeat or just overwhelmed by their own context. The other thing is being a small church pastor, and maybe big church pastors struggle with this, but there's always built in to it, growth is the key to success.
Right.
And not growth necessarily in a discipleship model, but just growth. And there was 150 people at church today. There were 300 people at church, whatever. I mean, I've never had 300 people at church, but I would feel very successful then, right. That it would change my, maybe I'm speaking right, or we're doing the right things. It becomes very much about us, but it's hard to get away from that, So, I mean, when I sit with pastors...
So that weighs heavily on you.
Yeah, because there's this little anxiety in the back of your head all the time thinking, man, and then you just kind of, your heart sinks when people are like, oh, gosh, church is so small, or, oh, wow, they get excited. There was a lot of people here, and you're like, why does that matter? I mean, like, we're rating how well we're doing on that. So that sometimes weighs heavy on me. It used to be financially... being a father and husband, and then trying to be a pastor and not be paid a lot, having to think, do I want to be a bivocational pastor like you, or do I want to try to live an austerity lifestyle, which is hard when you have children.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, those are all things that I think I struggle with.
Yeah, that's, I relate to some of that. I wasn't even thinking about some of that, but I had an incredible little opportunity. I was at a event on our way back from Flagstaff. We stopped in Phoenix because some big Christian guys were there. So Mark Dever from Capitol Hill, and Russell Moore, the head of the Southern Baptist Ethics and Civil Liberties Commission, and Al Mohler, Southwestern Theological Seminary. So they were all kind of in town and having this conversation. I got to be at kind of a small conversation. But just having this realization that most of the people that were there had these churches that everyone views as doing well, right? And and you're in these conversations with these types, and I'm this very small church pastor, and it is interesting how you struggle with it, feeling, even though I believe in what our church does so deeply, all of a sudden you're self-conscious, and I wouldn't even thought about that in your case, but I guess I just see you as loving what your type of church so much, but we all have these relationships, right, with people that have different types of churches, and the going feeling is bigger is better.
Yeah, and as a speaker, and I like to speak, and part of my job involves speaking, and I think over the years I've gotten a lot better at it, but I'll tell you, it's a lot more fun to sit in front of 150 people and talk, because at least a third of them get your sense of humor, and that means that's more than two. Right? But when there's 30, that means that one person is awkwardly laughing at every one of your jokes. It's a whole different dynamic, or if two people are distracted, it's a much bigger impact when you have a smaller community.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like it's way, for me, it's, some people have that fear of public speaking over death. I guess I don't have that fear. And it's probably part of why I do what I do, but it's way easier. I've spoken in front of bigger groups, 700, 800. I've never done thousands, but that was very comfortable, because you just look out in the sea of faces and a bunch of them are looking at you, and you can make eye contact pretty much anywhere you want in the room. You can find somebody to talk to. But, a couple of years ago, our church was, 30 folks, and every once in a while there'd be, I think there was one Sunday with 5, and we were just getting started. Those were the hardest times to preach or speak, or, because you're just hyper aware. And even 30 or 40 people or something like that, one of them is looking at their phone. And as I'm preaching, I'm like, is he watching the Cardinals game? Is he taking notes? I don't know. And somebody gets up and goes out the back door, and you go, oh, they're done. They've had enough. I'm just thinking about hyper aware of each person. And so it made it so much harder. And my wife would say, you just don't, you don't seem comfortable, but then you speak over here. I saw you speak over there, and you look so comfortable in front of a bigger group. And it's true. I'm personally far more comfortable when I'm not hyper aware of individuals.
Yeah.
It's interesting. Yeah.
And I also think like we excel as leaders in different ways, in the sense that like I lead small groups because it's part of my job. Right. I hate leading small groups. I love being part of them. I just don't want to be in charge. Yeah. I don't want to lead the discussion. I want to just prepare and be part. Mm-hmm. But when it's a large group, I tend to not want anybody else to be in charge but me. Interesting. Because it feels like my element. That's what I feel comfortable with. Yeah. So I think we all have those. That seems a little off track from being vulnerable.
Well, the other part of why another thing I struggle with, I guess, with all that is that I've got like these deep seated issues. Like I'm a kid whose parents. I was an only child, and so my mother would confide in me a lot because my dad is like he's a quiet guy and he just doesn't. He's not a talker, and so I would always have to talk to my mother. And so, in a sense, I'm really good at talking. Like since I was a kid, I've been holding adult conversation, right? But then at the same time, like my job as a pastor is to meet with people, and for them to talk to me, and for me to talk to them and bear their burdens. And because of that journey of mine, like that's one of my biggest fears is that I'm going to have to like carry your load, and that I'm gonna be weighed down by it. Now, in a sense, that's exactly what a pastor is supposed to do, right? Is like help bear other people's burdens and shepherd, but not alone. You're doing it with Christ, and it's a joy, and it's hard, but it's walking with Jesus. But I lose sight of that a lot, and I get to this place where I just feel like I'm carrying the weight of the world because all these people within the church who I'm talking to have issues. I feel like it's on me to solve them and figure them out. And I get tense and stressed, and that's just a bad place I go. Which is it's like, I've thought before. I'm like, does this mean I shouldn't be a pastor? But then it's like, no, I don't think that's what it is. But I have to learn to walk with Jesus in this. And so something about pastoring just is extremely exhausting to me. And I'm sure every pastor's got some issue, right, that they bring to the table through which they're overexhausted. And then just the regular pastoral duty, it is just hard. It's hard to be in the midst of people's darkness and story, and then add in our issues, and it's compounded. So that emotional stress, and it's no joke, And so I'm not complaining. It's took me by surprise. I can imagine how the people in our churches wouldn't get it. I would kind of think like, man, you got the dream job. Like I talk to kids, young guys. I want to be a pastor, and I'm like, maybe you do, maybe you don't, By that, do you mean I want to get up in front of people and speak and, wear cool jeans and like, sure.
I've never seen you wear cool jeans.
I don't wear cool jeans.
Okay.
Right.
You've evolved from
But some pastors do, and they're
right.
on TV and people think that's what's going to happen.
Right.
But it's like, man, okay, like, do you want to endure a lot of emotional strain? Do you want to have like burdens on your soul day in and day out and see these people that you love, but that just the dark stuff they're dealing with every time, and it's heavier. You don't just you're not just buddy with people. Like right. Everybody, there's more. That's a high calling. I hope you take it, right? That'd be good, but it's not just a cool job. Like you're going to be wiped out. For Jesus, and you're going to have to lean on Jesus. And it's going to be hard to lean on Jesus because you like read the Bible for your job, and it's confusing. Yeah. Anyway, so back to our topic. Bryan, what are we talking about? What is this podcast? I forgot. Faith over breakfast.
Faith over breakfast.
What's the concept?
Yeah.
Well, we have breakfast together.
Yeah. Which we're doing
at 7:30.
Yeah.
And then we discuss faith.
That's right.
And today we're talking about transparency in leadership, difficulties in being a pastor, not in terms of like just complaining like, well, it's me.
Yeah.
And I have not felt that at all from these conversations, but just discussing this is not an easy job. It's very fulfilling, but to be considerate of why we're doing this, where we put our hope in, like where do we get the strength to push forward, and just being considerate of that, how important it is, because you're shepherding you're speaking on a stage every week. And then you're also being a shepherd to people, which a lot of people who want to go in ministry, they probably like the idea of like having their voice heard and stuff like that.
Right.
And maybe it's for the best of intentions, but just may not realize the implications of being a pastor and how important it is to be a shepherd in your congregation. On top of that, I've met a lot of pastors that were great pastors.
Yeah.
But they kind of their families were kind of forsaken too.
Right.
And there's a responsibility to their own families. Like, oh, because you did such a great job as a pastor, it's okay that you didn't, where your responsibility was as a husband or as a father, kind of fell short.
Yeah.
And not to say like, I'm not a pastor, I'm not a father, and I'm not a husband. So I'm not going to act like, well, if you did it the way that I would have done it had I been in those positions. But just something to be aware of if someone is considering going into ministry or feeling as if they're called. I agree that what an incredible opportunity and a blessing to be called to ministry and to do this. Not just that you might be called to ministry and not be a technical called to ministry, but not to be a pastor.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I was. So in this, what the options are, right? Is you can get into being a pastor, and you can buy into this idea that I need to be an example, right? Which you do. That's true. But you could buy into that and have this idea like, so what I have to do is I have to live an exemplary life, and I have to model that to everybody so that they can, know that I'm really trusting Jesus, and then be inspired to trust Jesus themselves. And which all that, as I'm saying it, I'm like, yeah, there's truth to all that, right? But then in doing that, you can take on this mentality of when I struggle, they can't know. I can't tell them. Because if they do that, then what's that going to do to the faith? What's that going to do to our church? And they're going to go to there's a guy that's not struggling, a block away, so they'll go to his church or whatever the feeling is. And something that Eric and I have talked about before is like we've kind of decided we're not doing that, like no more, like not in our church. Like we're gonna be honest with you, like when we say follow me as I follow Jesus or whatever, like we're not saying follow me as I follow Jesus well. We're saying follow me as I struggle to follow Jesus. Follow me because I had to repent today, right? Or something like that. And so, one way, Eric, you've in your church, there's this practice that I thought was really, really unique. You had this chair. And it was once called the sinner's chair. Now it's called the healing chair. And will you tell us about that? And then how you had to sit in it, right? And so tell us about that real quick.
Well, so when we first planted our church 17 years ago, and I don't remember the musician who had this album, and it was called The Sinner's Chair. And on the back, it had this little blurb that said that Martin Luther had this chair called the Sinner's Chair in his house, and that when people wanted to confess something, they would come sit in that chair, confess, and people would pray over them and sing over them.
Yeah,
I thought this was an awesome idea. I didn't bother to do any other research. So Rod, my co-pastor, also thought it was a good idea. He went and bought this chair, painted it black, and put the 7 deadly sins on it, and we stuck it in our church.
Gnarly.
And people came and sat in that. In the first year, I decided if we're going to get people to sit in it, I needed to sit in it. So one of my sermons on Jonah, actually the opening sermon for Jonah where he's running away, I dragged that chair up in front and sat down in it.
Yeah. And
I didn't know when I was preparing for that sermon that my father-in-law was going to come for the very first time.
Of course.
And so, and I was really just confessing my own fears about being a pastor, about wanting to follow through on this calling. And, and this was just the first year of our church. There's my father-in-law. So that was how that chair kind of took off. And people came to Christ in it. There's a lot. I mean, a lot of times during the back end of our worship service, which is a lot of music and communion and those things, people are gathered around someone praying over them. And it's a really cool thing. A few years ago, we decided that like our church is the black and the focus on sin. I mean, not that we don't focus on sin.
Right.
People would say the Village focuses on sin way too much. But we agreed with them and thought that we should really talk a lot more about what happens in the process of confession and repentance. And that healing is a big part of that. Yeah. So we painted the chair white, which took about 80 coats because it was black. And we put like little red crosses on it, so it looks like the Red Cross chair now. And we call it the healing chair, and we talk a lot now about, that the opportunity to step into healing through confession and repentance is for our body and our soul and our mind and our hearts. We put those on the chair. And now people sit in it and confess, but also are speaking out the healing that they want. And so it's a big part of like creating a culture of vulnerability and honesty there in the service itself.
Yeah. And then,
by the way, I did do the research on that and there are some ideas about how Luther obviously took the confessional outside of the curtain and made confession more public, but I'm not sure he had a chair at his house.
Yeah. Well, let's hope he did. Or maybe that was your idea.
Yeah.
Maybe it all started at the Village, and then that's fine. For us, we've got, we just have we have a silent time of confession. So we don't have a chair. I like that. I'd like to see, I'm sure like as time goes on, we've talked about like we want to have the same kind of liturgical rhythms, but we probably won't always do them exactly the same. We want that because I think people get into a place where they, start to just take stuff for granted and forget the impact when you've just done it over and over. But then there's something good about repetition, so you don't want to lose that. So, we'll see what we do down the road. But right now it's silence, and I tend to say, or Nick, my co-pastor, tends to say something about, how like this confession is either Nick tends to put confession right when we're leading into the Lord's Supper. I tend to put it earlier in the service. But I tend to say something to the effect of like, this is the safest place you can be is confessing your sin before God, because he's like some of his greatest traits are his mercy and his grace. And so you can go confess your sin, to your friend, and hopefully that's safe, and you can, go tell it to a shrink or whatever. But at the end of the day, like God is the safest place. If you're willing to bare your soul and tell him the truth, he is merciful. He is gracious. He's also holy and righteous. So it's, that simultaneous fear and safety that you get with God that you don't get anywhere else. And it's beautiful. But we take that time of silence. And another thing that we've tried to embrace is just being really honest from the front, kind of like with you, bringing up that chair. There have been some big things. Like not too long ago, Mike, our worship leader, showed up to church, and he just said, I'm really burdened. I'm drained. I don't want to be here today. My wife feels the same. And they're like, leading worship together as a couple. And he said, I had a thought of like, could I lead into our time of confession by confessing this and confessing that, I know that God, loves us and has us in this community, but I don't feel it. And I'm burned out and I'm frustrated. And it was interesting because nobody else had ever asked me before, but I just looked at him. I said, you know what? Like I'm sure like the experience of so many people at our church is they feel that way and they just don't come. And so you're doing this incredible thing where you feel that way, but here you are and you're leading. Or they feel that way and they do come but they just can't. They don't say it. So like as a leader, like lead them in your processing this and how you're still going to worship Jesus like right now with them. And he did that, and he kind of stumbled through his thoughts on how he was feeling, how he and his wife were doing, what they were struggling with. And people had mixed feelings about that. I think for a lot of people, they were like, this is a weird way to start worship. Like, because aren't we supposed to go into this passionate moment of praise and hear the worship leader saying he actually doesn't want to be here? But then the majority of people really were just like, wow, like now he's more just so human. Like he was still choosing to come to Jesus, and he invited us with him. And it seemed to me like that was a really rich week of worship. And then And then one of my, I've confessed various things. One time I was getting ready for a trip where I was leaving right after church, and I couldn't get the hitch installed on my truck, and it was July in Tucson, and I just got so angry, right before church. I literally showed up in the clothes I was trying to get the hitch on the truck in. I'd been sweating, and I had kicked my truck. It had gotten to this point where I had decided I was going to kick an inanimate object to beat it into submission to let me put the hitch on, and I was like, how do I just get up here and just, hey, here's the word of the Lord, and I kind of had to put that out there, guys, I don't know about you, but today hasn't gone so well. And I got mad, and I need to bring this to Jesus, and I need to come to him and ask for his forgiveness and his help. Will you join me? And then, what did you share in the sinner's chair at the time? You had told me this before, right?
I don't remember, to be honest.
Or there was lying.
Oh,
or something?
yeah. So that was probably one of the bigger turning points in my ministry. Is early on trying to think through how to work out relational dynamics. There was these two people who were really at each other's throats, and so in order for me to try to explain what's going on and to help the other person understand, I divulged some information I should not divulge.
Yeah.
But it worked. I thought, oh, this is good. Once I divulged the information, they were like, oh yeah, that makes so much more sense. So when I was speaking to the other person, and they kind of clued in that I had shared something I shouldn't have, and they're like, did you share that? And I outright said, no, I didn't tell them. And I just lied.
Yeah.
And so for a week, I just was racked with guilt, and I was ready to quit ministry. And I was like, I can't be honest. And so then I went and apologized. I told the guy that, hey, look, this is what I did. And he forgave me, but eventually left our church because of that.
Yeah.
But then that next week, I stood in front of the whole church and said, look, I'm your pastor, and this is what I did. I lied, and I'm sorry. I've apologized. I've told the leaders and the elders. I prayed through it, but you need to know that this happened.
Yeah.
And that was terrifying. I think I probably lost at least 2 years of my life.
Yeah.
Hopefully on the back end.
This is
which
the
is
stuff
the only way you can lose it. But
you're like, they're not gonna. They won't follow me anymore. I'm done.
Yeah. Oh, I was sure of it. And, I was 32 years old and
you were really young.
Yeah, I was young.
Almost my age.
Almost your age. But what I have learned too as a pastor, it's that nobody, and I hate to say this, but nobody was really going to listen to you until you're 40.
You're right.
You're fighting to be heard.
I'm waiting for that day.
Older people in my congregation, I was lucky to have Rod, who was 10 years older than me, but the older people in our congregation were like, is this guy really legit? Because he has no life experience, and he's standing up there telling us, this is what, you need to be doing, this is what God says, and this is, but he's never actually had to try that out.
Yeah.
And so, then you lie, and you're like, well, everybody's right. I don't know what I'm doing, and they shouldn't listen to me. And so the enemy really can take those things too. But that was that definitely set the tone in our community though for honesty.
Yeah.
That if the pastor can talk about that, it has to go through a process, and so can I.
Yeah.
And I think that was pretty powerful. And I have continued that. Even when we do our belonging services, we do membership every year.
Yeah.
And I preach about the village. I open often saying, all of you will be disappointed.
Yeah.
This community is disappointed.
Yeah.
Often because we get a lot of other pastors saying, hey, how do you guys do community? I'll say that to everybody and then say, it's really not that great.
Yeah.
And we're actually bad at it, and we'll hurt each other's feelings and be disappointed and fail.
Oh, yeah.
Because that's the reality.
Other than, wow, what a beautiful community. Look at how great it is. You're joining this thing.
Yeah.
Right.
No, it's joining your own risk,
and
God will shape you like sandpaper on flesh.
Yeah.
Welcome to the village.
Yeah. Yeah. Right. That's good.
So.
Well, hey, it sets people up for reality, and then they can, when things are beautiful, they rejoice, right?
Right. They're like, oh my gosh, he was lying again.
Yeah. Yeah. Tim Keller has a little anecdote about a pastor. I forget, what, it was another country, I believe, but there was some young superstar pastor and some old pastors were talking about him and, his future. And one of the old pastors just kind of sat back and said, he hasn't suffered much, or something to that effect. And, it's like, there are like, and I think he was drawing crowds, but these older pastors were saying, let's wait and see, reserve judgment, like, because his life experience, Jesus has a long road for him. Let's see how that goes. Let's see how things turn out. What Jesus does with his life, and I think you're right, like that. I don't know if, age 40 is probably somewhere in there where people start to think you've lived a little, but there is something to, like, it's exciting to hear a young guy spout, right, with all his passion.
Yes.
But it's another thing to hear somebody who's walked through just drudging horror or some, or pain, or who's says, I have idols, I struggle, and I'm aware of it, and it haunts me, and because people, they go, that is true. That's somebody who walks with Jesus. He gets it, Yeah, one of the terrifying things for me, a piece of my story is that I'm divorced, and that, years ago when that happened, I was in a ministry context and went through just a ton of care. My church was incredible in that moment. But even during that time, I thought, I'm done. I thought, there's no way. I'd felt this sense of a calling from God, and I thought, well, that's gone, because I, tried marriage and I didn't do it well. There was, I should have made different decisions. I should have thought differently about this. I should have approached this different. I should have saved it. I should have been enough to fix it, or whatever, And so, moving forward, I was just like, always, like, every time, or Rod, your co-pastor, the first time we met for breakfast, he's just like, hey, how long have you been married? And I, and remarried for a couple years at that point. And he goes, and your daughter's how old, right? And, and I'm like, oh crap, here we go. Now I get to talk about divorce, and, like, with the church leader who's then going to go, oh, maybe you shouldn't do this, right? And it's just that haunting feeling. And so we were going through, we preach expositionally at our church, and so we're going through Matthew, and I'm in Sermon on the Mount, and here comes divorce, right? And that's like, everything in me wanted to, like, bring in a guest pastor or something, right? Or just talk surface level about it. And then Rod, of course, he goes, you better not do that. You should open this sermon with the truth. And I knew that was true, because a lot of the people in there know I'm divorced, and so, they know that. B, like, for the people who don't, like, when they know, like, I'm speaking about this not as somebody who's just looking at the text going, what does this mean? What is and don't get divorced, guys. Look, it says God hates it. But as somebody who's like, this is my story, and here I am wrestling with the words of Jesus about divorce, having walked through it. Like, you don't hear that. Like, that's not a lot of pastors. Some do, but I feel like a lot gloss over it. But how many just go, I wrestle with this because this is my story. And so that was a hard one. That was a really hard one for me, but it was good. I mean, because, I was able to just open up and say, look, I'm divorced. I think that's how I started. I just said, I've been divorced. And so reading these words of Jesus, taking this seriously, but this impacts my heart and my life. And just being able to share from that was terrifying. But I think it was really, really healthy for the church. And in this lifespan of my church, I've talked about it twice now. Both times, very, very difficult to do, but really important. Just for our community, and even for my walk with Jesus, to face that with them. So I don't know. I think it's key. I think it's good. It's scary. Some of our core member, even my wife and I now, like, our deepest, darkest marriage pain, is well known to a core group of our people in our church. Like I look at them and I just think, you have 99 reasons to walk out of this church because I'm not good enough. And you could, and you know all of it, and you're still here. And that makes me feel like extremely loved by God and by them. And I'm just so glad as a pastor I get to have that. And I'm not hiding. And I can't imagine being in a community where I, as the pastor, couldn't speak openly and honestly with some folks. Not that I just want to blurt that to everybody.
Right, because total honesty isn't the solution to everything.
No. and the point isn't, the church isn't a support group for me where I just need to get all my stuff out.
Right.
But the fact that I can have, that the community that I'm asking other people to experience, like my family is available to have other people minister to us, right? And I think the same is true with you guys.
Yeah. Well, and I think pastors, leaders are culture creators. So we're setting the tone for the culture. Yeah. And if it's a culture of honesty, and I mean, when God tells Ezekiel that he's going to take his wife, and he tells him to groan inwardly. Yeah. It's not that he isn't saying don't, just shove it down. He's acknowledging that there's pain. And I think that's the big part of our communities in particular, is that life is just hard, and we don't want to wash that over. It doesn't mean we don't rejoice, we don't party, we don't have fun. We don't try to reflect the great rejoicing of the kingdom and the hope of the coming of Jesus. That's a big part of it. Yeah. If you have pain and no hope, then why come to church?
Yeah, absolutely.
That's kind of stupid.
But the hope doesn't seem that great when you don't acknowledge the deep pain and the realities, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
I feel like when there's a freedom to fail, not that we take every chance we get to, but when there's a freedom to fail, there's a hope to fight. Yeah. And you're doing it with your community, especially when your leader took that extra step to say, it's okay to look where I've missed the mark, and I'm going to continue doing that, and you will too, and now we can do it together and just walk in complete transparency. Yeah. And none of us are going to be alone as a result of that. Yeah. And we know that God's going to love us regardless.
Yeah. Yeah. God's love is incredible. He entered in before we even cared into our lives and began a work in us, and so do you think that the day you fail, he's done? No, doesn't seem like it. That's not, I love that the heroes of Scripture all have preserved in Scripture a major failure. Have you noticed that? Moses, Abraham, David, if God is overseeing the preservation of his story, and he included major failures of every one of the great saints, I mean, doesn't that tell us something? Not that it's and it's about his grace, because it's not these people's greatness that carried this story on. It's the grace of God, because they would have blown it. And so that's why we're trophies of his grace, not trophies of our own capabilities, right? Well, I think we've podcasted for a while here. I have no idea how long. It's good to... Breakfast is gone, except for Bryan's. Bryan, you ate a third of your coaster.
I ate a third of my coaster. Maybe even... Yeah, it's about a third. Maybe even less than that. But it's on... I didn't have a fancy plate, so I didn't want to crinkle into the microphone. So I didn't want to.
Wow, you just have of you. Oh. Well, cool. I ate my muffin with a little miniature spoon, and so it took me a little longer, but it was delicious. Thanks to XO Coffee for letting us use their cool loft up above their little restaurant here. And
it was super quiet today.
It was really quiet. It's the summer in Tucson. We're a college town. People are gone. It's hot. I think, it's I see two guys both working on their computers, down there. But
their kitchen's closed down.
Yeah, that's probably why. So you don't have the kitchen. So before we end, Bryan, I did have one curiosity. So last podcast, you fell asleep, and your car had minor damage, according to you. But it seems like you've gotten a new car.
Yes, it was.
So what was the exact story once you were able to backtrack? You fell asleep,
Bryan.
And what did you hit that you totaled your car?
Well, I hit a curb, but I might have hit something else. I'm not sure because
you were asleep.
Either fallen asleep, blacked out, whatever it was.
I'm concerned about this falling. Was this because of work or like?
I had spent I think I actually mentioned it. I had fallen asleep. Oh, I had stayed up all day.
Right.
Because I was about to go to bed in preparation for work. My friend had a seizure.
That's right. So you were in the hospital.
So I went into the hospital all day. And I took a nap there, but I was there until I had to work.
Okay, I was just concerned that this blacking out thing was a habit, but that's never happened before.
Well, he had a semi-bus.
Oh, the semi-bus thing.
Yes, I didn't fall asleep because of that.
Just creamed on the freeway by a large bus.
Exactly.
You went to work the next day.
Yeah, that day.
Right. They made public service announcements due to you at work.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. Okay.
So,
but your car got totaled because it hit something and a curb.
Yes.
Completely, unrepairably totaled.
Yes, hypothetically. Maybe
it's repairable. Total loss, right? They
said total loss.
The cost to repair it is more than the value of the car.
That's what I feel like it was.
So they paid you.
Probably tore up the bottom of your car, right?
Yeah,
or something like that.
Exactly. And I got more than what I paid for it too.
Oh, sweet,
which is nice. But this is the first time doing it. Yeah, but it's good.
So
I was about to go into this is my first time doing always. Yeah, I was going to go into unnecessary details that don't even matter. But maybe we could talk about it another time.
Well, you're okay, and you got a new car. Okay, yeah. I know you said that earlier. I just was like, okay, well, what exactly happened to the car? But it just scraped the bottom, probably.
Yeah. Well, apparently there was a bad oil gasket. Probably the axle's bad too.
Yeah.
I mean, it wasn't I touched the curb. It was bad, but.
Did you turn in the car? Did you give it to him?
Yes, I still need to go find the title somewhere for my car is. But
I was going to say, I'll take it if, pass it on.
You want my old car?
Yeah.
Right, well, my dad wanted to do that with mine. Turns out our insurance company was like, yeah, and he can buy it from us.
Yeah.
And it wasn't going to be like what you thought, like the $500 or $200. They wanted the price they paid for it to me.
Oh, no thanks.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I was like, I don't think so.
Yeah, you don't want to.
No, I don't want to do that. No, it's funny because I was helping my friend look for a Honda online, and there was a cord that sold. So I'm kind of thinking you stole it out from under us.
Probably.
So on that note, I think we should end our podcast. Thanks for taking my friend's car, Bryan.
I'll still sell it to them. I'm just saying.
For more than he paid for, of course.
Exactly. Oh, we'll talk about it. No, thank you so much for joining us, both of you. Being just me.
Pleasure.
Not that this is my podcast, but this is Faith Over Breakfast with Andy Littleton and Eric Seaman.